Lena gripped the steering wheel of her truck, her knuckles white from the cold as the storm howled around her. The road was barely visible, obscured by the relentless snow and howling winds. She knew the terrain like the back of her hand, but tonight, the wilderness felt different, more dangerous. She was alone, and the sense of isolation weighed heavily on her. Just a little further, she muttered to herself, trying to shake off the unease gnawing at her stomach. Her radio crackled to life, a voice breaking through the static. "Lena, it's Noah. The storm's worsening. You sure about going this far?" Lena exhaled sharply, glancing out at the trees whipped by the wind. The small cabin she called home sat ahead, nestled in the dense woods, far from the nearest town. She was used to being alone in these parts, but this storm was unlike any she'd seen before. "I'm sure. Just keep an eye on the tracker. I'll be back by morning." Noah, her closest friend and a fellow wildlife rehabilitator, didn't like the idea, but Lena knew the urgency. A pack of wolves had been spotted near the perimeter of their shelter, and one of the younger wolves had been injured. She couldn't let them suffer out here. As Lena navigated through the forest, the snow grew deeper. Her headlights illuminated the path ahead, casting eerie shadows against the trees. The howls of wolves echoed through the wind, sending chills down her spine. Lena's breath came in shallow bursts, her heart racing as she imagined the wolves, hurt, alone, and starving in this harsh winter. The radio crackled again. "Lena, you hear that?" Noah's voice was low, tense. Lena paused, her hand frozen on the gear shift. The sound of howls filled the air, louder now. She knew wolves had a way of communicating, but these calls seemed different. Her pulse quickened. "Lena, we've got movement. Something's off. Stay sharp." Lena swallowed hard. She wasn't far from where she had last spotted the injured wolf. Her eyes scanned the trees, searching for any sign of the animals. Suddenly, a flash of gray fur caught her eye. Her breath hitched, and her hands gripped the wheel tighter. She saw it. A lone wolf, its coat matted and frail, staggered through the snow. It was emaciated, dragging itself along as though every step was a battle. Lena's heart broke at the sight. She needed to act fast. She parked the truck, grabbing a blanket and some emergency supplies from the back. With the snow falling harder now, she had little time. The wind was picking up, whipping her face as she trudged toward the figure in the snow. The wolf froze, its amber eyes locking with hers, filled with a desperate kind of recognition. "Easy, boy," Lena murmured, kneeling in the snow, hands outstretched. "I'm not here to hurt you." The wolf growled weakly, its body trembling as if in fear or pain. Lena could see the thin ribs beneath its fur, the exhaustion in its stance. Before she could take another step, there was a rustling in the trees, a movement too quick to be ignored. Lena's breath caught in her throat. A second wolf appeared, equally as weak and cautious. This one seemed more alert, its eyes scanning the snow around them. A third wolf emerged from behind the trees, even more skeletal than the first two. It was clear that it had been on its own for far too long. Its eyes were hollow, its body barely able to move. Lena's heart pounded. She couldn't take all three back alone. She had to act fast. "Noah, I need backup. 3 wolves, all injured. I can't move them alone. Get here now." The radio buzzed with static, then Noah's voice crackled through. "On my way. Hold tight, Lena. Stay safe." Lena took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she approached the wolves. The first 2 looked wary but not aggressive. She spread a blanket between them, speaking softly, trying to coax them into cooperation. But the third one, the weakest of them all, was hesitant. As she kneeled beside it, the wind howled around them, a constant reminder of how much time they were losing. The snow was coming down harder now, and Lena could feel the temperature drop even further. "Please trust me," she whispered, reaching out slowly. The wolf stiffened, but didn't move. Her heart swelled with a strange mixture of fear and hope. If she could just get them all to safety. Suddenly, the wind shifted, and a sharp bark echoed in the distance. Lena whipped her head around, scanning the trees. A fourth wolf, darker in color, appeared in the shadows. It wasn't alone. Another figure, this one much larger and more intimidating, emerged beside it. Lena froze. It was a pack. "Lena, we've got more movement. Get to cover!" Noah's voice blared over the radio, but it was too late. The wolves were closing in. The larger, dominant one snarled, its eyes fixed on Lena and the injured wolves. The situation was escalating quickly.
Breath hitched as the first wolf, the one she'd been helping, growled weakly. It was trying to warn her, but it was too weak to do anything. The tension in the air was palpable. Lena's eyes flicked from the pack leader to the injured wolves, realizing that they were no longer just being rescued. They were part of a much larger and more dangerous story. With no time to waste, Lena hurried to wrap the injured wolves in the blanket. The dominant wolf watched, his gaze unwavering, as if deciding whether to attack. Lena's pulse raced as she made her move, guiding the weaker wolves toward the safety of the truck. The pack leader growled, but it didn't approach. Instead, it turned and disappeared back into the trees. Lena breathed a sigh of relief, her heart still pounding. The tension hadn't broken, not completely. As she loaded the wolves into the truck, she glanced into the trees, half expecting the pack to return. When Noah finally arrived, he helped Lena secure the wolves in the back of the truck. The wind had died down, but the sense of danger remained. It wasn't just a storm anymore. It was the wild, unpredictable force of nature that had brought these animals to her doorstep. As they drove back to the shelter, Lena kept one eye on the rearview mirror, her thoughts swirling with the unknown. The wolves were safe, for now. But what if the pack returned? What if they weren't the only ones out here, fighting for survival? Lena could only wonder, and she could only hope she'd be ready. The drive back to the shelter was long and silent, the storm now a distant roar behind them. Lena's eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, watching for any movement in the trees. The shadows seemed to stretch endlessly, and the silence of the wilderness felt oppressive. The pack had disappeared, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, watching, waiting. Noah sat beside her, his face hard and unreadable as he scanned the snow-covered landscape. His hands rested on his knees, tense and alert. He hadn't said much since arriving, but Lena could feel his unease. It mirrored her own. "We made it," Lena muttered, more to herself than to Noah. Her voice strained from the cold and the uncertainty. "But what now?" Noah turned his gaze toward her, his eyes narrowing with the same mix of worry and concern she felt. "We keep going," he said quietly. "The wolves need us. The pack needs us." Lena nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring herself or him. The wolves they had rescued, the ones huddled in the back of the truck, were only part of the equation. The rest of the pack, the dominant one, the one she had nearly crossed paths with in the woods, remained a wild, untamed presence in her mind. When they reached the shelter, Lena breathed a sigh of relief. The familiar, comforting sight of the cabin and the small, protected area they had set up for rehabilitating wildlife offered a brief sense of safety. But even as they pulled into the yard, the gnawing uncertainty stayed with her. They moved quickly, unloading the wolves and taking them inside to the warmth of the shelter. The once frightened creatures, now calm under the shelter's roof, rested in quiet exhaustion. Lena worked silently, her hands gentle as she checked each one for injuries and made sure they were settled. Her heart ached at the sight of their frailty, their ribs showing through their matted fur, their legs trembling as they laid down on the soft bedding. When Lena finally stepped outside, Noah was waiting for her, standing near the edge of the shelter, his eyes scanning the darkened horizon. The storm had passed, but the sense of unease had not. The air felt colder now, heavier, as if the wilderness itself were holding its breath. "Do you think they'll come for them?" Lena asked, her voice low, laced with fear she wasn't sure she wanted to admit. Noah didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the distant tree line. Finally, he exhaled slowly, a sound almost like a sigh. Maybe. Wolves don't forget. And a pack like that, they're protective. Lena's stomach tightened at the thought. What if we're not ready for them? "We'll do what we always do," Noah said, his voice steady, despite the storm of uncertainty swirling between them. "We protect them, we help them, and we face whatever comes together." Lena stood beside him, her gaze still fixed on the darkness beyond, her heart torn between the peace of the shelter and the wild unknown that loomed outside its walls. The pack was out there, somewhere, and though they had saved these wolves, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. In a world so unforgiving, there were always more dangers waiting in the shadows. The wild had a way of testing you, and Lena knew deep down that she wasn't done being tested. The wolves weren't the only ones fighting for survival.